So I'm going to start about a month ago or so in a church leaders weekend away, which is really significant because what I feel has happened is that after it, God has started moving in people, and people have started basically pouring stuff out, emptying themselves, and God has been putting some stuff back in again. And there's been some very exciting results. For me, I feel more switched on and alive, and I actually care about people more than I've cared about people before. And I just know around the room, you could talk to quite a few different people, and they'll have a testimony of how God has transformed their lives, and it's quite recent, it's current. And what I felt like God was wanting me to bring today was that God started something, but there's more to come. And the more to come bit is the bit that I want to look at. But just very briefly, the picture, I had a picture at the Leaders Weekend away, and it was a picture of a jar. I know a lot of people have seen it before. I know Jamie did a really cool PowerPoint on it for youth. Basically, it was attached to this verse, and the verse goes, "Give and it will be given to you, a good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over will be poured into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured to you." And the thing that God was talking to me about was this. He's not a tit-for-tat God. He doesn't have a limited resource. So, if we give him a little bit, he'll give us a little bit back, because he's like that. What he was saying, I felt and prompted me was, he gave me this picture of this kind of jar. And if you imagine, for the moment, the green bit, it could be anything, but imagine the green bit's the stuff that I've got, that I control, that I want to be in charge of. It might be my finances, my money, my family. It's all these things that I'm looking after. And the empty bit is the bit that I give to God. I let God control and have hold of. And he was basically showing me that if you imagine that empty bit, that's the bit that God can pour into. And that's a kind of capacity for him to go into. And the bit that I hold on to, God's not a kind of bully God. He doesn't just wrench it away from you. He just waits for us to give it to him. And so, obviously, it's very clear that, if I've got half a full, if I keep half of it, there's only half left for God. And so the other way round is if I let go of that, it gives more room for God, more capacity for God to fill me and have his way in my life. And so the question, another picture came to me, which was a similar thing, but was the question about what is at the bottom of that jar? What is that bit? What are the bits that are down there that are kind of limiting the capacity God has got to fill us? And at the Church Leaders Weekend away, I had this thing, which I think is probably relevant to many of us a lot of the time, and it's this sense of sometimes we leave God's presence with a disappointment and a relief. Okay? The relief bit is that God hasn't got down to the deep bits that hurt. The bits that might make you well up if you start talking about it. We're quite good at burying those, and we kind of avoid them. So there's the relief bit. But the disappointment bit is that God didn't get down to those bits. It's a kind of, weird thing. And I just shared with the leaders, that actually, what are we going to settle for here? What are we going to leave disappointed but relieved? And then I had a picture of what was at the bottom of the jar, and this was specific, but it has relevance again. And the picture was of some lies that were down there, and I saw at the bottom of this, in this kind of floating water, quite murky down there, there's a couple of lies, and the lies were to do with love. So there was a word floating in it. It was love, and there was a word belonging. They were both floating in there. And I just had the sense that there were some lies going around in people's heads that were actually limiting God's capacity, which was to do these two lies. Number one, you're not loved. And number two, you don't belong. There were two, and this was among leaders. But that's not it. That is a bit of it. But hey, there's a whole bunch of other stuff. What's at the bottom of the jar? It's deep stuff that hurts. We all can carry some stuff, and it's variable. It might be that you don't feel accepted. It might be that you might. There's just so many different things it might be. There's the things I can't let go of. The things that I want to hold on to. An example for me personally was coming back to London and a sense that I'm bringing my children back into, Dagenham and all that, and looking at the education system around and looking at the schools and thinking, could do better than that, really, It's holding on to my hopes, for my life and my family and all that sort of stuff. There's a lot of things that we find it really hard to let go of, actually, if you really think about it. I mean, in the context of us, we might think, oh, no, it's fine, but actually, sometimes it's really difficult. Anything after the but, I think it was Julia Jones brought this to the leaders, but there's that sense that sometimes we can say, oh, yeah, that's all really good, but there's this bit, but I'm not quite sure about that. I don't know if I agree with that bit, but is there anything, is it anything after the but or before? I don't know. But anyway, you get what I'm saying. There's sometimes a but we put, and then there's lies. So there's these things. So what I feel is that people have started to empty some of those things out. I don't think it's stopped, because I think it's an ongoing thing. But there was a sense at the Leaders' Weekend that people started confessing it and saying it out loud and saying, look, I'm really struggling with this. And somehow, saying it out loud, I don't know how it works, but it did. It somehow completely poured that murky bit out. And so I left the church leaders weekend away feeling very empty in a good way. I was there was this kind of thing I wasn't carrying around anymore. And so that's what I feel God has been doing among us and has got more of to do. And so the question is, so do I pour out? Do I let go? Do I really believe in this stuff? Can I get over my hang-ups? Can I let go of those things or not? God wants us to have life and life to the full. Satan wants to have half a kind of life. That is an ideal situation for him. To kind of have a bit of it, so we feel like we're all right-ish, but to only have half of it. And what I'd like to say today is there is a battle on. We're in the middle of it, and the truth be told, it is a challenging, hard battle we're in. Because the reality of it is painful. Where people feel let down, hurt, disappointed, the reality of the stuff that's going on inside is painful. Just as painful as a real-life image, battle. But what I want to talk about, I'm going to talk to you about a few different people in the Bible who started living this poured-out life and what happened with them and what we might learn from it. I wanted to very quickly read to you a parable. It's by a guy called Dallas Willard. And this is a parable. Recently, a pilot was practicing high-speed manoeuvres in a jet fighter. Fun. She, notice it's a female, I don't know why, she turned the controls for what she thought was a steep ascent and flew straight into the ground. She was unaware that she had been flying upside down. This is a parable of human existence in our times. Not exactly that everyone is crashing, though there is enough of that, but most of us as individuals and the world society as a whole live at high speed and often with no clue to whether we are flying upside down or the right way up. Indeed, we are haunted by a strong suspicion that there may be no difference, or at least, that it is unknown or irrelevant. The battle among us is so crucial because there's a lot of people who just don't know. They're waiting to see which way's up, which way's down. And that's why it's a pretty difficult battle we face. So I'm going to move on to the next bit. So obviously we're looking for this poured out life, but the real battle is, do we actually do it or not? And so the first person I want to talk about is Abraham. Okay? Now, we all know the story about Abraham. It's got particular resonance to me and my family because my first boy is called Isaac. Sometimes people look at me, Isaac, really? Are you sure? Has Isaac heard that story? Now, the reason why we called him Isaac is the fact that it means he laughed. And the point is that, Isaac was born to Abraham when he was pretty ancient and past it. It was supernatural. It was a promise that he had waited for years and years and years and years and years, and probably might have been starting to give up on, trying to reason it away, thinking, oh, well, maybe it was hypothetical, or I don't know, something strange going on. But he turned up, which is amazing. But then, the crazy bit was when God came to Abraham and said to him, I'd like you to take Isaac up that mountain over there. In fact, he said, I'll show you the mountain when you get there, and I would like you to sacrifice him. Now, the question I have, well, there's quite a lot of questions about that. The question I have got is, why a mountain? Is God really mean? Think about it. Abraham, he hears the instruction, and amazingly, he's going to do it. But then not only does he have to do it, he has to take his son up a mountain. I mean, it's not a kind of, let's quickly nip round the side and get it done quick. This is a long walk. This is a walk in which his son is right next to him. This is a walk in which his son is asking, Dad, we're doing the sacrifice. Where's the sacrificial lamb? It's obviously becoming quite real that this is going to actually be him. Why a mountain? Something I thought about mountains were that when you get to a mountain, you really start noticing you're walking. I don't know if anyone's walked up a mountain before. When you're walking along a pavement or a flat ground, you walk, and you can almost walk without even noticing it. You can have a chat, conversation, stuff like that. But as soon as you start getting an elevation, you can feel it in your legs more. You start puffing. It will start stopping the conversation with the person next to you. You notice you are walking up a mountain. This was a walk in which Abraham may well have had a lot of questions. But he may well have not had a lot of answers. I mean, it doesn't say he had lots of answers. Now, this is the bit I find amazing. So, obviously, we know the story that Abraham he's going to do the whole hog here. He's about to actually sacrifice his son, and then God tells him to stop. And this is a bit, basically there's this, so that God provides the ram, or whatever it is, a lamb or something, in the bush. So he provides there. And then Abraham named the mountain. And he named it, God will provide. And then, this is the other amazing bit, is that there is this phrase that became part of the Jewish tradition. It continued on. And this was the phrase, it says, on the mountain of the Lord, it will be provided. It became a refrain. It became something that came back. It became their testimony. And so, at the point of sacrifice, he will provide. There's no getting away from the fact that he was about to do it. It's at the point of. But at the point of, God will provide. And that is a promise for us. It is something that's been, that someone walks up a mountain to name. And that is at the top of this mountain, which is, the mountain is basically walking up its sacrifice. At that point, God will provide. So, a poured out life. It's costly. But God will provide. In the Bible, earlier on, it says that Abraham believed God, and it was credited to him as righteousness. There's something about the economy of God which is different to ours, which is, as we pour out, there is something of value in it. There's something that triggers something in his economy. Okay, so there's my first story of a person in the Bible. Hebrews 11, verse 19, I just want to quickly read that. Now, you notice I've got a proper preaching Bible. It's absolutely minute, so it will take me quite a long while to actually find it, I think. I might not even be able to read it. Hebrews 11, verse 9. Is that right? 19, sorry, thank you. It says, Abraham reasoned, so this is an interesting bit. So as he was going up here, it says this, Abraham reasoned that God could raise the dead, and figuratively speaking, he did receive Isaac back from death. Abraham, through his journey with God, was able to reason the unreasonable. You know, he's able to reason something that isn't reasonable. And I think that's what God has got for us. Right. Next story, Jesus. Okay. Now, this story is in Mark, chapter 10. And this story just got me, and it always does. And it's about James and John. There's an interesting bit about the story. This comes straight after. You know the story about the rich young ruler, where he goes up to Jesus and says, I'm doing all these laws, I'm doing all this stuff for you. What else can I do? He's really trying to get the best rank Christian sort of thing, following you. What else can I do? And so Jesus says, so what you can do is you can sell all of your belongings and follow me. You can sell everything, the whole lot, And then that guy walks away. He actually walks away and is sad because he's got so much. He couldn't pour that out. It was too costly for him. So this follows that bit in the Bible. And James and John, so disciples, I can't believe they do this. I still find it hard. I'm actually going to turn to it because I'll probably paraphrase it wrong. Matthew, Mark, Luke. It's not very long. Right, here we are. Yeah, chapter 10. So, chapter 10, verse 35. Then James and John, the sons of Zebedee, what a great name, Zebedee, came to him. Teacher, they said, we want you to do for us whatever we ask. What a cheek, eh? What's that about? I want you to do whatever we ask. Oh, what do you want me to do for you? He asked. They replied, well, now I think they took Jesus aside, I imagine, Well, first of all, let one of us sit at your right, and the other at your left in your glory, please. I find that amazing. They must have known Jesus a little bit by then. What makes me happy to feel is that the disciples would have similar hang-ups and things. They make mistakes like we do, which is really good to know. And also, Jesus loved them through it, which I find is brilliant. And then Jesus says, you just don't know what you are asking. The disciples, they were projecting something of what they thought would be the solution to the problem onto the situation. So in their mind, they believed in Jesus. I think, yes, is the Messiah. And then what they did, and it was a mistake, is that they then thought they knew what the answer was going to be. It fits into their way round of thinking, in their economy, and how they would do it. And so they were imagining Jesus would lead an uprising, Jesus would overthrow the Romans, and that Jesus would become the king of the Jews. That's what the expectation was. And so, they wanted to be part of it. What a cheek! What about the other disciples? At least they gave it a go, I suppose. But that's their way of thinking. But then Jesus said this: you don't know what you're asking, and I'll show you why they didn't know what they were asking because of that. You see, that sign there says, Jesus, King of the Jews. That was when he was crowned. Do you still want to go to the left and the right? Really? You see, Jesus' ways are just not our ways. We try and project something of how we would do it onto it, and we make a mess of it. You see, this is what Jesus said. He said, this is not surprising, when the 10 heard about this, they became indignant with James and John. I'm not surprised. Jesus called them together and said this, "You know that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." You see, God's way is not our way, and his ways are pretty well the other way round to how we would see them. Certainly the earth's way of seeing them. They are generally topsy-turvy and upside down. And so I think Jesus has quite easily demonstrated that living a poured-out life in that way around, the way up is down. The way up is service. Now, I'm going to read a bit from Philippians now, and that's going to be probably where I'm going to spend the rest of this time. Well, it's not quite true because we're going to Corinthians a bit, but Philippians is really what struck me after the Leaders' Weekend. I was reading Philippians, and there's some bits in it that just really struck a chord. And the first bit was in Philippians 2. And it says this, and this is quite a big chunk, but I'm going to read it anyway. So, chapter 2. If you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any fellowship with the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and purpose. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility consider others better than yourselves. Each of you should look not only to your own interests, but also to the interests of others. Your attitude should be the same as that of Christ Jesus. Now, this is the ultimate example of a poured-out life. It says this, who, being in the very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, but made himself nothing, taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself and became obedient to death, even death on a cross. Therefore God exalted him to the highest place and gave him the name that is above every name. That is, at the name of Jesus, every knee should bow in heaven, on earth, and under the earth, and every tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. So basically, it says this, Jesus made himself nothing, not only human, but he was born in the lowest place and lived in the lowest village. He not only lived in the lowest village, he hung out with the lowest people. He not only served, but was obedient to death. He didn't just die, he died the death of the worst criminal. So every step of the way, he went to the bottom. There was not a single bit where he tried to grab anything. He just went down and down and down. But then, God said, he rose him up and up and up. Because Jesus is now exalted in the highest place. Every knee and every tongue and every principality will confess that he is Lord. There's something about living a poured-out life, which while you pour out, when you get to the bottom, you get lifted up, but you get lifted up beyond anything that you could have ever even conceived or dreamed of or thought was the best way. And people have begun to experience that in their lives, that they begin to see, my goodness, God had a better plan. I mean, if I did it my way, it would have been all right, but I'm so glad I did it what God wanted. So God's economy is the opposite way up to ours. In his economy, the way up is down. The first shall be last. The poor in spirit are in fact blessed. The wise are foolish. Now, there's something I wanted to bring out of this, which is to do with the currency in this upside-down economy. There's a couple of things, but I think the thing that I wanted to bring out of Philippians is this bit. It says, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any fellowship with the Holy Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and purpose. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, but in humility consider others better than yourself. And so The currency, I felt, is to do with humility. Now, you've got to be careful with the word humility. It says, in humility, considers others best than yourself. Now, that doesn't mean to say you think you're rubbish. Because if you think about it, if you think you're rubbish, then it doesn't take much for someone to think of someone above you, or better of you than, if you're the worst of the worst, you think, oh, you're a bit better than me. That's not saying a lot, is it? There is a correct view of ourselves, and it's what God's view of us is. So it's not thinking little of ourselves, but it's just not thinking about ourselves. This is what C.S. Lewis says. A proud man is always looking down on things and people. As long as you're looking down, you cannot see something above you. And my question is, where is your gaze? Because there is the pride, which is the opposite of humility, which is you're feeling good about yourself because you're looking down on other people. But there is also an aspect of where is your gaze? Are you looking across at other people? There's that comparison thing that we can sometimes fall into, which is just so prevalent. So there is the question is, where is your gaze? Okay. Now, the third person I wanted to look at is Paul. Okay. Now, Paul wrote Philippians, some of the bits I'm reading out of, and he was writing Philippians in chains. But I wanted to say that if I could like Paul to anyone, it'd be Cristiano Ronaldo. And I'll tell you why. Okay, think about it. Okay, you've got Cristiano Ronaldo in a Champions League final, Man U against Real Madrid. Just imagine, I know it's not going to happen, but, key player, Cristiano Ronaldo. He is a key player. If anyone enjoys football knows it. He basically is a game changer. He scores goals like anything. He's like got a booster rocket up his bottom. It's just unbelievable, it really is. But imagine what would happen if he, halfway through it, swapped sides. Imagine the uproar and the consternation in Real Madrid's team. It's like, oh, what has happened? That is exactly what happened with Paul. You see, Paul switched teams. He was a murderous opponent of the Way, which is the Christians. He was not only a murderous opponent, he was a brilliant opponent. He was an outstanding theologian. He just knew the Bible. He was unbelievable. He was like Cristiano Ronaldo in football terms. He was just brilliant. But God whacked him in. All I can say is he's on the road, and suddenly God just turned up and a bit like, no, I won't. But it's an unbelievable. Yeah, you know where I was going. It's a bit like, it's just amazing. So he was blinded, and Jesus said, what are you doing persecuting me? The crazy thing is that he was on his way to go and get a whole bunch of people in the Way, or the Christian movement, following Jesus. They was about to shove them in prison. And God brought him up short and said, look, I want you to start working for me. And blinded him, and after 3 days, he could see again. And then in Acts 9, 22, 23, it says this: Saul grew more and more powerful and baffled the Jews living in Damascus by proving that Jesus is the Christ. After many days had gone by, the Jews conspired to kill him. He was just so talented and full of God that he was like Cristiano Ronaldo swapping sides. His life, the rest of his life, was spent basically telling people about Jesus, or in prison telling people about Jesus. He spent about 5 or 6 years solid in prison. Well, not solid, in different states, but he was in prison for about 5 or 6 years. People think, people know that he was killed by the Romans, but in 68 AD, they think he was beheaded. I'm going to skip that bit. But this is what I wanted to bring out from Paul's life. So he's gone from being this amazing, respected leader of Jews to basically hanging out with criminals a lot of the time. The way up is down. He wrote Philippians while he was in prison. One of the times he was in prison. And so this is what he says, chapter 3, verses 1 to 11. Finally, my brothers, rejoice in the Lord. It is no trouble for me to write the same things to you again, and it is a safeguard for you. Watch out for those dogs, those men who do evil, those mutilators of the flesh. For it is we who are the circumcision, we who worship by the Spirit of God, who glory in Christ Jesus and who put no confidence in the flesh, though I myself have reason for such confidence. If anyone else thinks he has reason to put confidence in the flesh, I have more. Circumcised on the 8th day, of the people of Israel, of the tribe of Benjamin, a Hebrew of Hebrews, in regard to the law, a Pharisee. As for zeal, persecuting the church. As for legalistic righteousness, faultless. You know, he was the best at doing the law. But then he says this, but whatever was to my profit, I now consider loss for the sake of Christ. What is more, I consider everything a loss compared to the surpassing greatness of knowing Christ Jesus my Lord, for whose sake I have lost all things. I consider them rubbish, that I may gain Christ and be found in him, not having a righteousness of my own that comes from the law, but that which is through faith in Christ, the righteousness that comes from God and is by faith. I want to know Christ and the power of his resurrection. So basically, it's an absolute picture of what it is to live a poured out life. He's basically switched sizes, switched economies, and said basically what I used to think was good. You know, when I had, that full up pot of me, I now see that as rubbish because there's no room for God in it. Basically, the question is, which kind of prison was he in? He basically traded a prison of thought and mind and religion for an actual prison. He spent 5 or 6 years in prison, but the fact is that he had joy in the real prison. And his real joy was because he knew God. He realized that he'd been locked up all this time, desperately clinging to his own righteousness. And the question is, could we be like that sometimes? Can we desperately cling to try and be right? Are we desperate to hold it together sometimes? Or could it be time for us to let go? Now, I've got one bit to show you from a film clip now, because I come to the final part. So we've looked at Abraham, we've looked at Jesus, and we've looked at Paul. And the next bit is us. It's us. We're the next bit. Okay? So I've got a film clip for you. Bear with us because we've had a bit of problem with this. But there's 2 bits I hope we'll see. And if not, you might see a different bit, but we'll find out. Right. So there's the us bit. Last Sunday I had that kind of picture of what's going on in that clip. That some of us feel a bit like statues sometimes. You know, there's kind of hardness and feel really not very alive. That was definitely how I felt before God met with me and changed how I was. And it's a bit like God breathing life back into people who have been in battle but then cut off at some point. But this is the bit. The bit that struck me was that in all of those stories we've talked about, all of those people who lived a poured out life, there was something extra. And it's God's secret wisdom and plan. There's something about, the whole thing about God's way being blowing James and whatever his face's ideas out of the water were. And he turns things around. And this is what I felt like God wanted to finish off with. And it was 1 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 6 to 11. And this is it. We do, however, speak a message of wisdom among the mature, but not the wisdom of this age or of the rulers of this age who are coming to nothing. No, we speak of God's secret wisdom, a wisdom that has been hidden and that God destined for our glory before time began. None of the rulers of this age understood it, for if they had, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. The thing is that if the rulers at the time had got any idea of what would happen, what would be unleashed when Jesus was crucified, they would not have done it, including Satan, including all of the principalities and powers. They would not have done it, just like in that clip, the white witch would not have done it, but they just did not know. And this is what it says, however it is written, no eye has seen, no ear has heard, no mind has conceived what God has prepared for those who love him. Now, the thing is that my widget's not working anymore. How dare you? The scope of God's reach, right, the scope of God's reach is breathtaking. He knows the beginning from the end, and we win, obviously. But he knows it. When we think we might know the best way, we just don't. Really don't. If the rulers of this age had known the secret, they would have changed their plan. But they didn't know the secret. And this is the amazing secret plan. Do you know what the secret plan is? It's us. We are it. There isn't anything different. We are the secret plan. I'll continue because it says this. The Spirit searches all things, even the deep things of God. For who among men knows the thoughts of man except the man's spirit within him? In the same way, no one knows the thoughts of God except the Spirit of God. We have not received the spirit of the world, but the Spirit of who is from God, that we may understand what God has freely given us. This is what we speak, not in words taught us by human wisdom, but in words taught by the Spirit. The man without the Spirit does not accept the things that come from the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness to him, and he cannot understand them because they are spiritually discerned. The spiritual man makes judgments about all things, but he himself is not subject to any man's judgment. For who has known the mind of the Lord, that he may instruct him? But this is the punchline. But we have the mind of Christ. What was unleashed is a bunch of followers who have got the mind of Christ. We've got the mind of Christ. What Paul talked about as the all-surpassing greatness of knowing him. When he says knowing him, it's not kind of just being a friend. It's actually knowing his mind. And I believe that is where God is calling us to as a community. And it's that sense that we can pour out, and God's going to pour back in again, but he's going to push it down until it overflows. And so as we let go and pour ourselves out, what is God going to pour in? Well, he's going to pour in God's mind. In situations, among friends, as we go along and see something in the park or in a shop, and we see something in someone, and we call it out because we know God's mind. We have his thoughts. We have God's wisdom in situations. So then, if we have these things that are poured into us, then what spills out? Well, God's rule spills out. God's power spills out from us. Heaven is spilling out of us. His way round, his way up. So if we go back to the original analogy of the aeroplane, there's people who are flying upside down, but they'll suddenly be touched by something that is the right way up. And they will start thinking, my goodness, I'm going the wrong way round here. And that is what God's calling us to. But there is an absolute ferocious battle over our minds on this. And it isn't an easy one. There are lies that come in to do with, but it's all right for them, they're okay, because their life is all sorted. And they're all right flying the other way around because they've got everything sorted anyway. Those kind of lies. There's a kind of, I would do that, I would give those things, but I just can't let go of it because it hurts too much, or, it's all of those things. So that is where I feel at the moment God is stirring us up as a community. I think it's to release us to be God's mind on earth. And so there's a few things to think about. We will go on to, I have got a song for us to listen to, time of reflection, and then we'll go into some worship. But these are the key questions I want us to be thinking about, and it might well be God's dropped some other things in you. The first one was to do with Abraham. Do you feel like you're going up a mountain at the moment? Do you need God's provision? To do with Jesus, where is your gaze at the moment? Is that stuff to do with humility? Do you need to let go of anything? And do you feel like a statue? Because I certainly spent about 4 years feeling like a statue, kind of half me, and not really functioning. So I'll leave it there.
I surrender all to you, my God. I will give you all I have. For you took